Hi guys, welcome to this video showing you how to probe in EVE Online. In this video we're going to cover different types of probes, different types of probe launchers, the ships that can fit them, and different sort of scenarios you might want to use your probing skills in. I'm sitting here in my Interdictor, we'll get onto that fit in a second, but before we do that we need to look at the different types of probes. Now in EVE Online we have two main types of probe launchers. We have the core probe launchers and then the expanded probe launchers. The core probe launcher is the one that you're probably most familiar with. You would have used it if you're doing any sort of exploration, wormhole finding and stuff like that. This type of probe launcher can only use core scanner probes. These are little yellow probes here that you would have used before, probably the sister variety, hopefully. Now the core probe launcher has very low fitting requirements, only needs 15 CPU units, so it's quite easy to fit on most ships like Herons and exploration ships. However, it can only use core scanner probes, and core scanner probes can only find anomalies in space. So you're talking signatures like wormholes, data sites, relic sites, things like that. That's fine, but this is a video about combat probing, so that doesn't really help us much. If we go over to the expanded probe launcher, in the description we can see it can still use core scanner probes. We can still find wormholes and stuff. They can also use combat scanner probes. Now these are the little blue probes, preferably the sisters variety. These can find ships. Now, if we want to find starship structures and stuff, which is what we want to do for this, we have to use combat scanner probes, which means that we have to use the expanded probe launcher. That comes with the downside that the fitting requirements for this are significantly higher than the core probe launcher. That's going to cause us some issues when it comes to ship fitting. If we look at the ship that I'm currently sitting in, it's an Interdictor. You'll see it's not a standard fit. I don't have any guns. My tank is questionable at best. My rigs are just full processor overclocking units, and I have to use a co-processor in the low slot as well, just to get me up to enough CPU to be able to fit the expanded probe launcher. A normal Interdictor, if we look at something like a Flycatcher here, we've got a lot more tank. We've got a little Hore gun there that we can use to shoot people. In general, it's a lot stronger. So this standard fit, if you like, can actually take some damage. This one here has got missiles, so this can actually deal out quite a lot of damage as well. It's a more versatile ship. But the probing Flycatcher here can't do that. It can't do any damage at all. It can't really sustain a lot of damage coming in either. It does have a cloak. It does have the Interdiction spear launcher, which we need, and it also has the expanded probe launcher, which we're going to need for probing. So this ship has no bonus towards this module here, the expanded probe launcher, at all. Because of that, we have to seriously hamper the rest of our abilities to fit that module. If we look at something like Swiffle, which is a Tech 3 destroyer, we'll see that actually on its traits here, it has a 95% reduction in CPU requirements for probe launchers. So that includes our combat scanner launcher, which means if I simulate this ship really quick and we slap on an expanded probe launcher, I'll learn to type. CCP, please. We've got the expanded probe launcher there, and we still have a lot of CPU left. It barely uses any CPU. We're talking like 20 CPU here, compared with our original fit here, where it's using the full 220 CPU. So ship choice is an important factor when you're going to do some combat probing, but I wouldn't be led by the ship roll bonuses. So I wouldn't pay too much attention to whether or not your ship is bonus for it. What you want to be thinking about is the role you want to fulfill with your probes. There's going to be 3 or 4 main uses for probing in a fleet or individually. The first is as the FC. So the FC of a fleet needs to put his or her fleet at the perfect range to the enemy. So they're going to need some form of probes. Now, I personally would probably use a T3D if I was in a small fleet. Interdictor's okay for that, or you would look at something like a mainline Doctrine. See if I have a bit down here. So you might look at something like this, the main fleet Doctrine. and you'd actually have to turn off a lot of your DPS. Usually, you want to keep your tank. You turn off all your DPS, and I now have enough space there that I could fit a probe launcher on there if I needed to. So I can slap a probe launcher on, it fits, and I could maybe turn on 1 or 2 guns just so that I can get in the action too. If you're probing as an FC, you do not want to turn off your tank in any way, because that's going to make you die pretty quick. And if you're in a ship that's got some low slot modules to assist with your agility, jump on this FC fit here, you want to keep, oh, this doesn't actually, I lied, you want to keep things like signal lamps and any sort of nano fiber modules down here, because you want the same speed, ideally the same range, so you can see what's going on, and you definitely want the same tank as your fleet. If I was turning off tank, for example, just to give myself more CPU, that's really bad. FC needs to be the last person to die, so you don't want to modify that. The Hurricane fits it quite nicely, actually, with just a couple of modifications down here, so I can still fit some guns and get on the action. That's one reason you'd use it as the FC. Another reason you might use it is to assist the FC. So oftentimes, if we're in a Hurricane fleet or something, I would fly this fit here, even though I'm not the FC. Because if the SC has to coordinate the fleet and probe, he or she has got to do a lot of different things there, and that just leads to mistakes. So if the FC can concentrate on commanding the battle itself and getting people into the right place, then a dedicated prober can actually do the fleet warps for the FC. You have to work quite closely with the FC. You have to ensure you've got permission to warp the fleet and make sure that the FC is ready for that. But it just lessens the load on the FC, so they have something less to do with it. Sometimes helps the fleet as long as you communicate really well. So FCing or working as part of a larger fleet is one reason you might combat probe. Another reason is what I like to do here, and that is to do a probing interdictor in a fleet. In this case, you're kind of on your own a little bit. So you're not going to be taking fleet warps. You're not actually going to be with the fleet. You're not going to be anchoring on your FC or your Logi or anyone like that. As soon as you enter battle, you need to get up to a tactical. And once you're on that tactical, ideally you want to have a cloak. You cloak up and you wait for your moment. You're looking for the enemy ships to get into a position where your FC can fight them. At that point, you need to get your probe hit, warp down to the enemies and bubble them in position where they are. Keep them where they are. You might also look for fast targets like tornadoes and just bubble them all the time so they can't actually affect your fleet. The key to that working is communication with your FC. If you warp into the enemies and your FC is tethered up and he's or she's off having a bio break or whatever, or they're not ready or they're fighting someone else, you're going to die on your own and you're going to look like a plonker. You need to make sure your FC knows what you're doing and confirm with them. I usually ask bubbles green or red, bubbles yes, no, and confirm that the FC wants you to bubble the enemy ships from that moment onwards, or if they don't want you to bubble the ships, then you might be headed home and you don't want to be bubbling things if you're heading home. It's a very fun role to play. It's not necessarily easy, but it does get you a lot of kills that you would otherwise miss. The main advantage I find being a probe interdictor versus a normal interdictor is that a normal interdictor is going to be in the middle of a fleet, and interdictors are going to be very high up the priority list for the enemy FC. If you're probing, you don't need to be with your fleet. You can be 1,000 kilometers off, cloaked up, completely invincible, away from the battle. No one even knows you're there, and you're safe. And then you can land at 0 on the enemies, so they don't actually really get a chance to shoot you until they're bubbled. Once you bubble the enemy fleet, you're public enemy number 1. You're going to die. Hopefully your Logi catches you, but either way, you just bubble the enemy fleet, and now your fleet comes in for the kill. So it's a very versatile role. You're probably going to die, but in Brave you get SRP, so it's all good. One other role that I started doing recently for a little bit of fun is probing Tackleship. Now, it's an interesting fit when you first look at it, but you have to realize that a lot of ships can't fit the probe launcher, and when you do fit the probe launcher, like we discussed, you're going to gimp your fit. The advantage that something like a stealth bomber has for probing tackle is that they can be cloaked and they can warp cloaked. And more importantly than that is under their roll bonus here. I open that up. There is no target delay after they cloak. So I can warp at 0 onto an enemy and immediately decloak and tackle them with my tackle here. So I don't have bubbles, I have tackle. If you're using another ship, even something like a Stratios, which can warp cloaked, you're going to have like a 10-second delay before you can actually lock up the enemy. That's 10 seconds for them to warp off. They're not going to be there by the time you're able to lock and tackle them. It's just not going to happen. The bomber doesn't have that, but obviously suffers from the lack of EHP here. This is not a particularly fast warp either because of the armor plates. So it still takes me 7 seconds to align, but I can do that when I'm cloaked. So I can just sit there and permanently align to the enemy, which is great. Being an armor fit, I've also fit an Afterburner. So the idea here is with this ship is to be always cloaked, use my probes here to land on the enemy, decloak, tackle them, start orbiting them pretty quickly using the Afterburner so they can't hit me very hard. And if they do hit me, I've got a little bit of repairs down here. Now, it's not a ship you're going to go out on your own. I have literally 0 DPS. I have no drones, no missiles, no rockets, no nothing here. This is for standing fleet type stuff where you're in your Alliance home staging systems or somewhere like that, and you have friends nearby that are just ready to kill the enemies. So again, you need a bit of communication. You tell your friends on comms, hey, I'm going to go do this. How many people are with me? Are you guys going to back me up if I get this? If no one answers you, you do not want to be out there tackling stuff because you will lose this. And 40 to 50 million ISK, it kind of hurts. It's not the end of the world, but it's not fun. So make sure you have friends with you. Another reason, or the last reason I can think of anyway, that you might be combat probing is to hunt enemies as part of a blocks fleet. For the most part, hunters will use their D-scan to land on enemies because by the time they decloak, launch their probes, cloak up somewhere else, align their kind of put their probes into a pattern, cycle their probes, get a hit, refine that hit down to 100%, and then walk to the enemy. The enemy's like gone. They're having dinner somewhere nice. So hunters don't really rely on it as much, but if the enemy goes to ground and they walk off to a safe spot in system and they aren't cloaked, they aren't tethered, then you can deploy your probes and hunt them down or flush them out, chase them, force them to make a mistake, and then you can get tackled, light a cyno, or call in friends, whatever you happen to be doing. So they're the main reasons I can think of probing. You've got your Interdictor, which is what I prefer. You've got your FC in type ship or your FC in support. Probing tackle, which is a lot of fun. Possibly your hunters. So let's move this outside and let's go see how we actually probe things. Okay, so here we are. We're out in space. There's enemies on grid. We are next to the enemy structures. There's an NPC station here. So this is going to be our kind of our playground grid for now. We even have a couple of friendlies up here. You'll notice I'm cloaked. I warped here. I cloaked up. Sensible thing to do. My ship is very weak. It can't really do a lot. If I get shot or seen, either the bad guys are going to run away because they know I'm here, or they're going to kill me, which is generally bad for me. So this is where we're going to start probing. The first thing we need to do is be opening our probe windows. Now, a lot of people use D-scan, which is a very useful thing when it comes to probing. You'll notice that your D-scan range is 14.3 AU. That means, I can see the Legion, but it means, for example, that I know there's a mobile depot somewhere nearby I might want to find. There's a Legion nearby. But it also shows me that the 14 point whatever AU around me is devoid of anything else interesting. So if I was looking for an enemy fleet, let's say there's 15 ruptures in here that I need to kill, I know when I start probing that I don't need to be too close to myself. They're not here. They're more than 14 AU away from me. So it's quite a useful tool to look at. If I open the probe window itself, it's on the same little interface down the bottom here. We go probe scanner, and you've got your own keyboard shortcuts there. The first thing it does is completely blind you. It's an interesting design choice from CCP. We need to fix that. So let's just get it so it's floating. That's a little bit better. I can see my overview again, which is useful. I know I'm still safe. People are a long way away from me. Still using up quite a lot of my screen. I don't personally like that. So I like to just detach my probe window from the map. That's just how I like it. If you want it another way, that's it. So we're going to position that. I'd like to keep the overview clear. I want to know that I'm safe. I also like seeing my modules. I can see my cloak is still running, and that the new timer here, I still got 12, nearly 13 minutes of safety from my cloak. Over in the probe window itself, you'll see that there's some signatures around me. There's some unknown wormhole there, some mining things I can look at. None of those are ships. Now, the reason there's no ships is because I don't have any probes launched. So that's fine. Let's go launch some probes. So because I'm cloaked, I can't actually use my probes. That means that if you walk the grid, like I have, before you've probed, I've done this deliberately, I'd like to point that out, I now have to decloak and show the enemy what I'm doing. Luckily for me, that Astero's gone. So I'm going to quickly decloak, use my MWD, and I'm going to drop my probes. So that just means that I can burn away from my probes a little bit while my cloak's on cooldown. If the enemy happen to probe me down, if they've got combat probers, because I'm going quite fast, they will probably land too far away from me to actually kill me, and it'll give me a chance to run away. Also good practice to have an escape route plan, because this cloak is still burning down. I'm just going to line up here towards my bookmark so that if someone does land on me, I'm already aligned. Now, it's going to take a little while because of the Microwarpdrive. Turn that off now. I can recloak. Excellent. So now I have probes out. They're my probes. It's got my little ticker there, so I know they're my ones. And the bad guy's back, so he doesn't. Hopefully, he didn't see me. Doesn't know what ship I'm in, but he does know I'm probing. So he can see these two. I'm aligned. I'm cloaked. I'm safe. I'm not worried. Let's get the probe window back up. Because I disconnected it, I don't actually have a map yet. I can bring the map up. Just kind of click on this. Bring the map up by opening the solar system map, and I've got my map back. So now in my probe scanner window, I can see that I have some probes out. I have 8 Sisters Combat Scanner probes out, and they've got just over an hour of lifetime on them. So after an hour, I'm not actually sure whether they pop or they come back to your cargo hold. I'm sure someone knows. After an hour, they're no good. But I have them. They're ready. I still don't have any ships here. Now I can just kind of hit the analyze button without pressing anything else. We'll see what happens. I might get some ships show up. I might not. You can see they take a little while to scan there. So I got a load of ships. Now, there's a load of other rubbish on there too. There's some drones I don't really care about. I didn't actually get any ships. I just got drones. That's kind of boring. So if we look at the probe window down here, we have a few options we can look at. We've got this AU slider. It goes up to 64 AU, which covers the entire solar system and sun, as you can see in this map here. Let's bring that down to the smallest. Now, if we zoom in, we can see that I'm only now probing the default is the sun. I'm probing a very small area around the sun. Now, because that's a small area, it's going to be quite precise. If I hit analyze, it's unlikely there's anything there. Where is the sun? It's 7 AU from me. The chances are there's nothing there. Still going to take the same amount of time to scan. Doesn't matter how small you set this, it will still take the same amount of time. There's a mobile depot over there somewhere. Maybe we'll probe that down in a second. If I set that up to the maximum range, that's the entire solar system that is going to get there. Now that CCP have kind of changed the deep safes, I'm almost certain that nobody would be able to be outside of that range. So that will get every single ship in this solar system, including this Dominix that's just walked in, this Merlin, this Capture will probably show up somewhere, and every friendly ship. You'll also notice that took a little bit longer there in order to start the scan. Now, all those ships, that's not very useful. So in terms of range, you want to have the smallest range you can get by. Yeah, you can kind of accept. Because the range is so big, I can't walk to any of these ships. It knows there's a ship there, it will tell me there's a ship there, but much as like if you're scanning down a regular kind of exploration site, unless your range is small and your probes are on top of it, you're not going to be able to walk to any of these. I can walk to these anomalies, but they're not part of probes. So I want to reduce my probe size, keep that in the smallest amount possible. Now, for me, if I zoom in, I can see my home station's got this nice little icon. There's some scanning thing that I found there. All these little dots of results. I got my bookmark showing up as well, which is quite useful. Just down here, a little bit hidden underneath the rest of the icons, is a target icon. So that is where I am. That is me. Look, you are here. That's me. So I can double click on this. I can double click on any of these icons, any of these results, and it will center me on that. So I'm just going to center my map on myself. Have a quick check down here because I can see I've still got plenty of probing. People are still far away. I'm nice and relaxed. Now I can drag my probes around. So if I zoom in so we can actually see the shape of them, I can drag these anywhere I like. I can rotate the view. So I can drag in 3 dimensions. If you want to be a little bit more precise, you can use the arrows just to lock to one axis. And I want to make sure now that these probes are centered on me because I want to scan where I am. If there was intel that said, oh, there's loads of enemies on the sun, then maybe I'd consider double clicking on the sun, putting my probes on the sun and playing there. But I know there's enemies here. I can see them. I want to get them here. Double click on myself. You are here. Thank you very much. Zoom in, and I can start now moving these probes. As you tilt the map, initially it looks like I'm done. So I can be like, yep, that's perfect. I'm going to hit scan. If I do that, it's not actually going to hit anything because it's all the way down there. And no one's down there. There's nothing down there for them to be at. There's not even any of these little hits down there. This is going to return 0. You have to use the 3D view here to make sure that your probes are in the right place. So I'll do top down, put them in the right place, switch to sideways, zoom out a little bit, drag them roughly on top of myself, zoom right in again, recenter on myself. Just repeat this process until I'm confident they're on top of it. Now for that Dominix, it doesn't have to be precise. I could hit him, probably with a 2 AU range down here, and my probes could be just covering him. But for things like that Venator or the shuttle, I'm going to have to be incredibly precise because my ship has no bonuses for probing. It's not a probing ship. I've just put probes on it. I need precision and decent skills in order to pull this off. So I've sent it the probes. I can look. They're definitely on top of me. That's great. I've set the AU radius down here down to the minimum. The maximum is not going to get me anything. It has to be minimum. So let's hit a cycle on that. Let's hit analyze. And I'm fairly certain that Dominix is going to show up on my probes. You can actually see that one of my probes has warped to my grid just now. So the enemy can actually see now that I'm probing, which is kind of unlucky. So there we go. I got the Vexor, the Dominix. There's another Vexor as well somewhere. Now he's not on my overview. So that Vexor could be a friendly Vexor because I don't have overviews on my friendlies on my overview. He could be, in this case, he's definitely a friendly Vexor. If we look at the range, if I recycle that, maybe he undocked and we didn't see him. But if we look at the range, it tells me how far. And at that range, okay, so he must have just flown through. I missed him. I can also see there's an Atron. That's 13,000 kilometers away. There's also an Astra House. So that Atron is on that Astra House right there. I can't tell if he's friendly or not because he's not on my overview. He's probably off grid. So my probes work. That is a huge relief. There's a lot of crap on there that I just don't want. I don't want to go and fight a Fortizar on my own in an Interdiction. It's just not going to work. There's a filter up here. So we're going to click on the little filter. Now, I don't care about anomalies. I don't care about cosmic signatures. I'm not doing exploration. They're no use to me. Not too fussed about deployables right now. Deployables are your Sino generators, your mobile tractor units. I don't really care. I'm not going to fight a structure. Don't care. I'm also not going to go chasing drones across the universe. Don't care. Now I've got a much cleaner set of results. Now, you'll see that the number of hostiles has changed. There's now 5 hostiles, completely different results to what's here. This probe scan window does not update unless you press analyze. So you can't just press it once and expect it to update like you do with your overview. It's the same as a D-scan. You have to analyze each time. Let's reanalyze that. Now I have a much cleaner layout. I should just see these 4 ships. Okay. So now we have a bit of a problem. Is that I don't see 4 ships. I see 6 ships, but only 4 here. I'm going to close my map and I'm going to look around. I'm going to zoom out. Okay. There's an Atron there. So I know that Atron is friendly. Now, there's an Atron there that says 1369 kilometers from me. This guy here is only 241 kilometers, so I can't actually rule him out. This Atron here may have been friendly, it may have been hostile. Now, let's analyze again. I know this Atron is currently 1,500 kilometers from me. It's going to hover over him to make sure he stays at that range. So as my probe window completes, he was 1,500 something. The Atron is 1,500 something. So I know this Atron, WTR, this friendly guy here. I don't particularly want to kill friendlies, so I can right-click on that result and ignore it. So now I know I'm not going to land on a friendly. Now look, someone else has just landed. Venture. So if I hit probes again, that Venture is going to show up along with these 4 bad guys. Now I realize in this scenario I can very easily see the Dominix is the bad guy that I want to shoot. But if you're in an environment where you have 2 fleets, 1 friendly, 1 hostile, each with 200 people, it's virtually impossible for you to look at a list of 400 ships and work out which is which immediately. Now that Venture moves, so I should really rescan, but there's no other Ventures near me. I'm pretty sure that this Venture here, even though the range is different now, is the Venture that's friendly. I'm going to ignore him. Don't care. I'm going to assume that all the Atrons here are also friendlies, because we fly a lot of Atrons in Brave, strangely enough, and I don't see any hostile Atrons. There we go, they were both friendly. There's a Merlin there, and I don't see a Merlin. Oh, I do see a Merlin, so I'll keep him. The Gnosis, the Dominix, the Heron, I think, was also hostile. I'm going to leave the Heron where it is. So I now have my enemies probed. That's great. I'm actually going to warp to my Venture, because if I warp to the bad guys, they're probably going to kill me. So I'm going to pick the Venture here as my target. Hopefully he doesn't kill me. I'm going to align to him. My align time in this is probably a few seconds. That's not good for me. Now he keeps moving, so I'm going to have to realign. I'm going to hit my probes. Now, if I do look at, and I can do this on an enemy, I can see that Venture's on station. That's kind of okay. That's not very helpful, is it? I have to wait for another target to present itself. Now, the interceptor, you see, this stiletto has appeared. I cannot get a hit on him. My hit is 98.3, which you've probably seen if you've been doing exploration. While we wait for targets, let's see if we can fix that. So we open our solar system map. I'm going to double click on the stiletto, and that will actually center me on a ship. So that's really useful. Same as double clicking on the UI here, but this time I'm centered on that ship. Unfortunately, he's docked. Now on my keyboard here, if I hold down the control key, you'll see that I get individual arrows. Now each of these arrows represents a single probe that I have deployed. I have 8 probes out. They're in 8 different directions. That are the probes that I have. Now I can drag these arrows in and I can manually force these probes to get closer together. Now if I go all the way in, it's not very useful because the way it kind of works is that each probe says, yes, I have a result. It's this distance from me. Now if 8 probes do that much with triangulation in maths, you can work out pretty much exactly where that target is. But that only works if there's some distance between the probes. So if the probes are all on top of you, each probe says, yes, there's something within this distance of me, but it's not really, there's not enough distance between each probe to triangulate that down to a precise number. So you can't just slam it all down straight on top of each other. You're going to want some amount of distance. This is too close, it still looks too spherical. That still looks a bit spherical to me. Okay, that's not too bad there. So the original distance was something like that, I guess. And by doing this, we've just brought it down by a third. Now, unfortunately, that intercept has disappeared. That will get you most hits if you've got good skills. There's some things you won't get. Some interceptors you'll never hit. They're just too small. Their signature is too small. Capsules tend not to be too bad. Some ships, if they're using targeting SIBOs or things like that, you're just not going to hit them, unfortunately, not unless you use specialized ships and implants. We're not too worried about those. That's how we can find our results. So we now have our results here. We can see them. We know how to filter out friendlies the moment there are no friendlies. Oh, yes, there is. So there are actually friendlies there that I've filtered out. It says here that I've filtered 8 people. Oh, sorry, no, it doesn't. It tells me that I have ships selected. Up here on the ignored list, it tells me I've filtered only 1 person. If I click on the little X here, let's say that this guy actually turned out to be an enemy and I ignored him by mistake. I can untick him. Now he will turn up in the last position that my probe saw him. In order to find his new position, which is actually only just over 1,000 kilometers, I have to reanalyze. But by a process of watching your fleet mates, seeing where they are, watching the enemies, and having a rough idea of which enemies are which range from you. So, for this example, I've got kind of 8,000, 3,000, 1,000. I can work out 8,000, 3,000, 1,000, Moa, Gnosis, Dominix. These guys here are enemies. The Atron, he's a friend. I know that. Now, the Merlin, I just saw him warp off. So I know he's an enemy. I'm going to keep him. The Vexor, I don't see him in the enemies list. I'm pretty sure we have a Vexor somewhere around here that was friendly. I'm just going to ignore him for now. Now, that could be wrong. If I am wrong, I can just unignore him. At this point, let's change ship. I'm about to lose my cloak anyway. Let's change ship into something that can warp cloaked, and we'll practice warping into the enemies. What happened here, guys, is I walked down to a hostile Saber. I think he cloaked or walked off, so I missed him. But I know it says a hostile Condor there on my overview. So I'm just going to cycle my probes, make sure I align to this guy. I have a 7-second align time, so I have to align, otherwise I'll never get there. Probes are complete. Hit the warp to on the Condor. Quickly tell people in my fleet that I'm about to have this guy. Put some letters in fleet so they can walk to me. I'll land on the Condor. Try to lock him up. I need a decloak first. Lock him up. Apply my tackle. Start my orbit up. Turn my prop mod on so hopefully he can't shoot back. And then call in for help. My friends come in and we eventually kill this guy. Fortunately, we didn't get any more enemies coming out. So let's just go through a few tips and then wrap this video up. The first couple of tips are things that people have showed me recently. The first one is that if you launch probes now, this is a fairly recent change, you can now save location of those probes. That does mean you can kind of set up your own tax by moving the probes around in the map window, but it also means that the enemies can save your probe's location. So the enemy could just look at me here, think, oh, I want to warp in on this guy, save location on that. That gives him a bookmark. They can just warp straight to me, kill me. It's not so good if it's just me, but if I'm in the middle of a fleet, it also means that I'm giving away my fleet's positions, potentially giving away position of my FC, and so on. The enemy can just walk in and kill us all. That's not very good for us. The way I'd recommend to get around that is as soon as you launch your probes, set a formation, analyze, and that will mean that the probes warp off grid. They're only here for a second, and that just reduces risk that anyone's going to stumble across them in the same location. The second tip that I've been shown is a new button down here, which as you can see is a center current formation on your ship. So my probes currently are in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing there. I don't really want them there. I want them over here, which is where I am currently, right here. I could sit there and move them around, but if I'm in the middle of a fleet, I don't really have time to do that. Now I can just hit this button. I know my probes are on top of me. I can slam that down to minimum, analyze, and I now know that I can effectively probe the grid that I'm on without actually having to open up the map and all the rest. And hey, one of my probes has appeared. Another tip is about picking targets. So if you are probing down a hostile fleet, you could just pick anyone in that fleet and potentially to that person. The problem is if that person's at the back of the fleet, especially if they're moving quite quickly, you're going to land somewhat behind them by the time you're able to land, which means you're going to be behind the enemy fleet. You're not going to be able to bubble them. Chances are they're going to be able to shoot you anyway, so you're going to die and you're not going to bubble anyone. If you can, you want to look at the hostile fleet and identify some of the anchors or some of the people at the front of the fleet. That might be the FC's boats, like monitors. Could be certain linked boats or other special kind of ships you can see. It could just be the person that's furthest away from you. And then you want to warp to that person. That means that when you do land, although that person's going to be ahead of you now, you're going to miss that specific target, you're probably going to be in the middle of the rest of the fleet. The fleet tends to string out. That means you'll bubble a good percentage of their fleet. If you can get ahead of the hostile fleet and then warp at range into them, it means that you can put a bubble up and they'll drive straight into it, even better. If you happen to be probing a fast kind of flighty fleet, something like tornadoes or even frigates that tend to kind of warp in, sit around for a few seconds, and then warp off because they're a little bit skittish, you need to be timing your analysis. So as you see the enemy warp in, there's about 3-4 seconds where as they land, they slow down gradually and they're unable to move for a few seconds as they land. They're going quite slowly. If you manage to finish your analysis, so if you're probing and your analysis here finishes just as they land, you're going to be able to warp to them before they get a chance to warp off. It's a little bit hit and miss. The normal trick I like to use is pick one of your targets, it's one of your hostiles, use look at, and as they enter warp, the look at command will cancel itself. That's your cue to hit analyze. The analysis is going to take a few seconds to complete. If you're lucky, it will complete at the same time they land, and they won't have a chance to run away from you before you can jump on top of them and bubble them or tackle them. It's really effective against tornadoes if you can land it just right. It really does make a difference. I hope some of those tips have helped. I hope this video has been useful. Stay tuned and watch some more of the Brave Dojo videos.